The courtroom was tense, an electric hum in the air. All eyes were on Elon Musk, who stood confidently at the defendant's table. He adjusted his tie, his sharp, calculating gaze scanning the room as if preparing for the battle ahead. The case against him was huge. Accusations of corporate misconduct, shady deals, and unethical practices. It could shake the foundations of his empire. But he wasn't afraid, not anymore. Across from him, Judge Andrea Sutherland sat, her stern expression unwavering. She was known for being tough, but what happened next? No one could have predicted it. The judge, without warning, cracked a smile, a cold, mocking smile, and leaned forward, looking directly at Musk. "Well, Mr. Musk," she began, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "I'm sure you have many plans to save the world, again, while you're here dodging serious accusations. Care to enlighten us on how you'll save humanity this time?" The courtroom gasped. People whispered to one another, shocked at the judge's unprofessionalism. Musk's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He wasn't about to give her the satisfaction, but the judge didn't stop there. "I suppose you're too busy launching rockets to bother with basic business ethics? How convenient." She chuckled, her words landing like daggers. The press in the back of the room couldn't get their cameras focused fast enough. Elon's lawyers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had expected an intense trial, but this was personal. Musk, though, remained calm. He had dealt with far worse. Backlash, media firestorms, and 100 failed attempts. This courtroom mockery was just another bump in the road, but something inside him burned. It was the kind of feeling that made him wonder, what if she's right? What if this is bigger than I thought? For a moment his mind flashed back to the earlier days, those lonely nights spent in his tiny office, with nothing but dreams and determination to fuel him. He wasn't the same guy anymore, but this courtroom, this felt like a fight for survival. He'd fight back, and when it was over, no one would dare mock him again. The judge's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Perhaps, Mr. Musk, you're more focused on the next billion-dollar idea than you are on your responsibilities right now." She turned to the jury. "I'd like them to consider that." Musk's lawyer, Gregory Knox, stood up quickly, trying to regain control of the courtroom. "Your Honor, we request that you remain impartial. This is a trial, not a circus." But Sutherland wasn't finished. "Oh, I'm just getting started." She leaned back in her chair, a smug expression spreading across her face. "Let's see if you can outsmart the law the way you outsmarted so many employees, shall we?" Musk felt his chest tighten. Outsmarted employees. The accusation stung. He was no stranger to controversy, but this was something else. He could feel the eyes of the media and the jury boring into him. The world was watching, waiting, for him to crack. But Musk had learned long ago that there was no room for weakness. The billion-dollar ventures he had built didn't come from backing down, and neither would he. He stood up slowly, facing the judge with unwavering resolve. "Your Honor," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I've been through plenty of trials before, but this one, it's about more than business. It's about integrity. I didn't come here to argue with you. I came here to show you something." The room went silent. Musk's lawyers exchanged uncertain glances. Was he about to make a massive mistake, or was this the turning point? He turned toward the jury. "I've faced challenges my entire life," Musk continued. "From a kid who barely fit in, to running multi-billion-dollar companies. Every failure, every setback, it's only made me stronger. And if you think you can break me with words or mockery, you're wrong. Because no matter how many times I fall, I get back up. And that's what I'll do today." A murmur rippled through the room. The judge, taken aback, stared at him for a moment, her mocking smile faltering. Musk wasn't just standing up for himself, he was standing up for something bigger. He wasn't going to let anyone, especially not a judge, define who he was. As the silence settled, the court stenographer's typing was the only sound. Then Musk looked directly at the judge, a glint of determination in his eyes. "I'm not here to be mocked. I'm here to prove that the truth will always rise above the noise." The tension was palpable. The judge's eyes narrowed, clearly annoyed, but also intrigued. "Well then, Mr. Musk," she said, her voice cold, but with a hint of begrudging respect. Let's see if you can back that up." A sense of anticipation filled the room. The battle had just begun, and Elon Musk was ready to fight, not just for his case, but for everything he believed in. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The courtroom buzzed with whispers after Musk's defiant stand. His words hung in the air, echoing through the walls as if they had a life of their own. His confidence was palpable, but the room was divided. Some looked at him like he was a hero, while others saw him as an arrogant fool who had finally met his match. The judge, though still wearing that cold, mocking smile, appeared slightly shaken. Elon returned to his seat, his mind racing. His lawyer, Gregory Knox, leaned in, speaking quietly. "That was risky, Elon. You can't just mouth off like that. We need to keep this professional." Musk didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked straight ahead, his expression focused. "We need to hit them where it hurts," he muttered under his breath. "The media, the public, they've already written me off. It's time to turn the tables." Gregory sighed, glancing at the jury, who were visibly split between skepticism and curiosity. They weren't sure what to make of Musk's display, but it had certainly gotten their attention. Musk had one chance to make it count. As the day dragged on, it became clear that the prosecution was determined to paint Musk as a man who used his wealth and status to manipulate the law. Every witness brought in seemed to confirm the accusations. But the harder they tried to break him, the more Musk seemed to settle into a rhythm, like a boxer waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Musk's eyes flicked to Jessica Hartman, the new lawyer who had joined the defense team. Known for her laser-sharp intellect and impeccable track record, Hartman had a reputation for turning impossible cases around. She wasn't here just to play defense. She was here to win. Hartman caught his gaze, nodding slightly. It was subtle, but to Musk it felt like a signal, a reminder that this fight was far from over. Her first move came just after a particularly brutal witness testimony. The witness, a former Tesla executive, claimed that Musk had personally ordered illegal practices to be carried out at the company's expense. The testimony was devastating. The prosecution had been building momentum, and this piece of evidence could be the final blow. Musk shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He didn't recognize the name of the executive, nor did he remember giving such an order. The accusations hit too close to home, and for a moment, doubt crept into his mind. Could this be the end of everything he had built? Jessica Hartman, however, was unfazed. She stood up, her posture confident as she walked toward the judge. The entire room fell silent. "Your Honor," Hartman said coolly, "we request permission to cross-examine the witness." The judge nodded, and Hartman turned to face the witness. "What exactly do you mean by ordered?" she asked her, tone sharp. "Did Mr. Musk directly give you an instruction, or is this something you're assuming?" The witness, clearly rattled, tried to maintain composure. "It was implied. He made it clear what the company needed to do to stay ahead of the competition. There was no ambiguity." "No ambiguity?" Hartman pressed. "I see. So, you're telling this court that an entire business strategy, including potentially illegal actions, is based on implication? No concrete instruction, no written order, just assumptions?" The witness hesitated. He hadn't expected such a pointed question. The jury leaned in, hanging on every word. Hartman's next move was even bolder. "And I'd like to remind this court that Mr. Musk has consistently made it clear that his company's success is built on innovation, not on circumventing the law. So tell me, why, if you were so convinced that illegal actions were taking place, did you not report them immediately?" The witness stammered, struggling to respond. I didn't—" "Exactly," Hartman cut him off, a slight smile curling at the corner of her lips. "You didn't report anything because you were too busy trying to ride the coattails of a successful company." The jury murmured, and the tension in the room shifted. The witness was no longer the authoritative figure. Hartman had taken control of the narrative. Musk allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Maybe they had a shot after all. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Hartman was relentless, systematically dismantling the prosecution's case. one shaky witness at a time. By the end of the day, Musk could feel the tide turning. It wasn't just his team fighting now, it was the beginning of a shift in public perception. Musk was no longer the arrogant billionaire under attack. He was the innovator once again, fighting to protect his legacy. As the court recessed for the night, Musk and Hartman stood in the hallway, a rare moment of calm between them. "That was impressive," Musk said, his voice sincere. "You saved my ass today." Hartman gave him a dry smile. "Don't get too excited, this is far from over. But we're on the right track, and if you can keep your head in the game, we might just pull this off." Musk nodded, his mind racing. He had faced worse odds, but this was different. The stakes were higher. His reputation, his legacy, and even the future of his companies all depended on the outcome of this trial. But Musk wasn't the kind of man to back down. No matter what happened in that courtroom, he would fight until the very end. "Thanks," he said quietly. "I won't let you down." Hartman gave him a sharp look. "Don't do this for me, Musk. Do it for yourself." The words hit harder than he expected. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about proving who he truly was, someone who could rise above the noise and the mockery. The battle was just beginning, and Elon Musk wasn't about to lose. Elon Musk had always prided himself on his ability to compartmentalize, to push his past to the far corners of his mind and focus solely on the future. But as the trial continued to unfold, he found his mind drifting back to moments he'd long buried deep within himself. It was late that evening, after a long day in court. Elon was alone in his hotel room, the weight of the day pressing down on him. The courtroom had been filled with sharp words and the clatter of legal proceedings, but as he sat there, staring at the city lights outside his window, it felt like everything was falling silent. The memories flooded back, memories of his childhood growing up in South Africa. He was just a shy, awkward kid, more interested in books and computers than anything else. While his classmates were out playing sports, Elon was teaching himself to code and reading science fiction novels. He didn't fit in. Not in school, not at home. His father, Elon Musk, was a constant figure of disappointment in his life. Cold, distant, and critical, Errol's idea of discipline was not encouraging but demanding, always pushing Elon to achieve more, but never showing any affection or support. It was as if nothing Elon did was ever enough. "I've never seen a failure so determined to be great," his father would say. A biting remark that stung to the core, especially coming from someone who had never shown any interest in Elon's dreams. School Elon was bullied for being different. His peers would make fun of his large frame and his quiet, introverted nature. He was picked on for being the weird kid. But Elon had never been one to back down from a challenge. If they mocked him for being smart, he would outsmart them. If they laughed at his passion for technology, he would prove them wrong. The age of 12, Elon had already programmed his first video game, a simple thing, just a little game where the player controlled a spaceship navigating through space. He sold the game to a local store for $500, a sum that seemed enormous to him at the time. It was the first taste of success, and it was the spark that ignited something in him. That moment taught him that he could create his own future, that he wasn't bound by the limitations others set for him. He wasn't just a weird, lonely kid anymore. He was someone capable of achieving great things. Yet, the memory of his father's constant disappointment still lingered. Elon closed his C, eyes trying to push the thoughts away. He couldn't afford to get distracted now, not with everything on the line. But the more he tried to bury his past, the more it rose to the surface, like a dark cloud he couldn't outrun. The trial was a mirror in many ways. The accusations of fraud, manipulation, and shady dealings, they felt like an echo of the criticisms his father had always hurled at him. "You're never enough," those words seemed to say. The sense that no matter what he accomplished, there would always be someone ready to tear him down. Elon rubbed his eyes, letting out a deep breath. The pressure was suffocating, but he couldn't let himself break. Not now. The sound of a knock at his door broke him from his reverie. He stood up, brushing himself off as if to shake off the weight of his past, and opened the door to find Jessica Hartman standing there, looking as poised and calm as ever. "You okay?" she asked, her voice surprisingly gentle, considering their usual professional dynamic. Elon hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, just thinking about everything. Jessica stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Don't let it consume you. You've got this. You've been through worse. He glanced at her, surprised by the concern in her tone. What? Do you mean? She took a seat across from him, her eyes locking with his. I've read about you, the early days, the crazy ventures. You were rejected, laughed at even, and yet you kept pushing forward. You didn't just give up. Elon chuckled darkly, the weight of the past pressing down on him again. It's hard to forget what it feels like to be an outsider, to have everyone doubt you. Jessica leaned forward, her voice firm, yet understanding. I know what that feels like too, but that's the thing, Elon. You're not that kid anymore. You've built empires from nothing. You've changed the world. And this trial? It's just another obstacle. You've faced bigger challenges. Elon stared at her for a long moment, her words sinking in. He had faced rejection, ridicule, and failure, but every time he had found a way to rise above it. Maybe this wasn't as different as it seemed. It's just hard, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. No matter how many rockets I launch or how many cars I sell, it feels like people are always waiting for me to fail. They're always going to doubt you, Elon, Jessica replied, her tone more forceful now. That's part of the game. But you don't need them to believe in you. You've already proven what you're capable of. You're fighting for more than just your reputation here. You're fighting for something bigger, for all the people who are watching, who are betting on you. Elon swallowed hard, trying to process her words. She was right, of course. He had built everything he had from scratch. Nothing had been handed to him. And yet, as much as he hated to admit it, the fear of failure still gnawed at him. The weight of his past and present crashed together in that moment, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel vulnerable. The pressure of the trial, the media frenzy, the constant scrutiny, it was overwhelming, but there was no turning back now. I'm not going to let them win, he said, his voice steady now, filled with a resolve he hadn't felt just moments before. I won't go down without a fight, Jessica smiled, her eyes reflecting something deeper. That's the spirit. We've got this, Elon. One step at a time. With those words, a shift occurred within him. The weight of his past, no longer, seemed like an anchor. It was fuel. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for every moment that had led him here, every challenge he had overcome. And this was just another battle he would win. He stood up, feeling the familiar surge of determination coursing through him. Let's finish this. As Jessica followed him out of the room, Musk's resolve hardened. The court might have mocked him, but now he knew. He wasn't just going to fight for the future. He was going to fight to prove that everything he had worked for wasn't just luck, it was destiny. The next morning, the courtroom felt heavier. There was an unspoken shift in the air, as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The prosecution had already delivered a powerful blow, but Musk could feel it in his gut. Today, everything was going to change. He stood up as the judge entered, the room instantly falling silent. As the proceedings continued, the stakes seemed higher than ever. Musk's mind raced as he sat in his seat, his gaze scanning the room. The air felt charged. Everyone seemed to be waiting for the next move. Jessica Hartman stood, prepared to begin the defense's counter-arguments. She had been calm, collected, and sharp up until this point, but today she had something new to bring to the table. A surprise witness. Elon had no idea who this witness was, but he trusted Jessica. She had been a strategic mastermind up to this point, and he wasn't about to doubt her now. The courtroom buzzed as the defense team began to call the first witness. Jessica approached the podium with confidence, but there was something different about her demeanor today, a quiet intensity that suggested she had something up her sleeve. Your Honor, the defense would like to call an unexpected witness to the stand, Jessica said, her voice cool and calm. She turned to face Elon, who raised an eyebrow. Unexpected, Elon thought, feeling a flicker of intrigue. An unexpected witness, the judge repeated, clearly puzzled. He glanced down at the defense team and then at the jury. Jessica nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We believe this witness will shed new light on the case at hand, one that the prosecution has yet to consider." The judge motioned for her to proceed, and with that Jessica turned to the door, signaling for the witness to enter. To Elon's shock, the door opened, and in walked someone he hadn't expected to see, an old colleague from his early days. To a Tesla. The man was dressed in a sharp suit, but there was a familiar spark in his eyes, one that told Elon everything he needed to know. This was no ordinary witness. It was Ryan Turner, one of the founding engineers who had been with Musk since the early days of Tesla's formation. Musk hadn't spoken to Ryan in years, not since he had parted ways with the company during a tumultuous restructuring. Their relationship had been rocky back then, with Turner feeling overlooked and frustrated by Musk's unrelenting vision and demanding leadership. But now, as he walked toward the witness stand, Musk realized something had changed. Ryan's eyes no longer held the resentment they once had. In fact, there was a look of quiet respect in them, respect for what Musk had built, perhaps. Or maybe it was something else. The room fell into an uneasy silence as Ryan took his seat on the stand. The prosecution looked stunned, clearly unprepared for this twist. Musk's heart raced in his chest. Why was Ryan here? What did he have to say? "Mr. Turner," Jessica began, her voice smooth, "can you please tell the court about your experience working at Tesla?" Ryan took a deep breath before responding. "I was one of the first engineers hired by Mr. Musk at Tesla. We worked long hours, sometimes 18-hour days, to bring the first electric cars to market. And I'm here today because I know firsthand the kind of man Elon Musk is." Elon held his breath, waiting for Ryan to continue. This was the moment that could turn everything around. "People think they know him," Ryan continued, "but the truth is, most of what you hear is just noise. I've seen Elon face setbacks that would crush most people, but he doesn't give up. He never has." The jury was listening intently, and Elon could feel the shift happening in the room. This was not the defense he had expected. Ryan wasn't here to undermine the prosecution. He was here to humanize Musk in a way that no one had done before. He was telling the jury something the media hadn't been able to show, a side of Musk they hadn't seen. Ryan paused before continuing, his voice becoming more personal. "We didn't always get along, I'll be the first to admit that. But what you have to understand is that Elon has always been driven by something bigger than money, bigger than fame. He's been working on a vision, one that's always been about pushing humanity forward, not just lining his pockets." Musk felt his chest tighten as Ryan spoke. He hadn't realized how much the past still meant to him. It wasn't just the companies he had built, the technology he had pioneered. It was the relationships along the way, the people who had believed in him when no one else did. "I know Elon," Ryan continued, his voice firm. "And I know that if there's one thing he would never do, it's lie to the public. The idea that he would orchestrate a fraud or manipulate investors is absurd. He's made mistakes, sure, but he's always been honest about his failures. And I can tell you, as someone who was there from the start, that he's never once tried to deceive anyone. He's just trying to make the world a better place." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The jury seemed taken aback, and even the judge raised an eyebrow. Ryan's testimony had caught them off guard. Elon wasn't sure if it was the weight of the words or the unexpected ally standing before him, but something shifted in that moment. The trial was no longer just about facts and figures. It was about something deeper, the truth of who he was and why he had done everything he had. Jessica, never one to waste an opportunity, pressed forward. "And how would you describe the culture at Tesla during those early years?" Ryan smiled slightly, remembering the chaos of the early days. "It was chaotic, sure, but it was also inspiring. We were all working toward the same goal, even if we didn't always agree on the method. But Elon never wavered from that goal. We believed in it, even when we didn't always believe in ourselves." The courtroom was silent, the jury completely absorbed in Ryan's words. Elon looked at his old colleague, a sense of gratitude rising within him. This was the kind of testimony they needed. As Ryan's testimony drew to a close, Elon finally felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, the tide was turning in his favor. He wasn't alone in this fight, and the truth, as messy and complicated as it was on his side. As the judge called for a recess, Elon stood, his mind clearer than it had been all week. The game was far from over, but for the first time in days he felt like he might just win. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs after Ryan's testimony, and for the first time since the trial began, Elon felt the weight lifting off his shoulders. Even if only slightly. The tension that had gripped him since day one seemed to ease just a little, but he knew better than to get ahead of himself. This was only the beginning. The prosecution wasn't done yet. As the trial resumed after the recess, Elon's mind raced. He glanced at Jessica, who gave him a reassuring nod. He could feel the shift in the room. Ryan's testimony had left a mark, but it was only one piece of the puzzle. The real test was yet to come. The prosecutor, William Hargrave, stood up with a calculated smirk on his face. He wasn't going to let the defense take the upper hand without a fight. Hargrave was known for his aggressive tactics and his ability to poke holes in even the most airtight defenses. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Hargrave began, his voice smooth and confident, "you've heard the defense's narrative, their portrayal of Mr. Musk as a misunderstood genius. But I ask you to consider the reality of the situation. What we're dealing with here is not a case of misunderstanding. It is a case of deliberate manipulation, deceit, and fraud." Elon's stomach churned at the sound of Hargrave's words. He had expected it, of course, but hearing it again made his blood boil. The accusations were so far from the truth, and yet Hargrave's voice made them sound so convincing. It was a strategy designed to confuse, to make the jury doubt everything they had just heard from Ryan. Hargrave continued, painting a picture of Musk as a man obsessed with power and wealth, willing to deceive investors, regulators, and the public, to protect his empire. The prosecutor carefully highlighted the financial details, focusing on the numbers, the stock prices, and the private communications that had been revealed during the investigation. Mr. Musk was fully aware of the impact his words would have on the stock market, Hargrave said, his eyes locked onto Elon. And yet he chose to ignore the law to take advantage of investors and to make false statements in order to manipulate the market for his own gain. Elon clenched his jaw, his fists tightening. At his sides, he had been through worse, but the weight of the accusations still hit him hard. The idea that he could be portrayed as a villain in this entire ordeal, it was infuriating, but he couldn't afford to let his emotions take control. Not now. "Mr. Musk," Hargrave continued, turning to face Elon directly, "you may have built extraordinary companies, but your actions here in this courtroom have shown a pattern of disregard for the truth. The question you must ask yourself, Mr. Musk, is this: how far are you willing to go to protect your empire? What are you willing to sacrifice?" The words cut deeper than anything Musk had heard in the trial so far. The thought of sacrificing everything for the sake of his companies, for the sake of progress, was something that haunted him constantly. But was that what this was really about? He had sacrificed relationships, his own health, even his peace of mind, all in the name of building something bigger than himself. But had he crossed a line? Had he been blinded by his ambition? The question lingered in his mind as Hargrave made his way back to his seat, throwing one last glance toward the defense table. Jessica stood, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Your Honor, we request a recess. The defense needs time to regroup." The judge nodded, and the room buzzed with whispers as the jury was excused for a break. Elon let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. As soon as the courtroom emptied, he leaned back in his chair, trying to steady his racing thoughts. Jessica turned to him, her face serious. "We knew Hargrave would come hard, but this is getting personal. He's trying to break you down, to make you second-guess your every move." "I know," Elon muttered, rubbing his temples, "but there's one thing he's missing." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "Everything I've built was never about me. It's about something bigger. It's about the future. I won't let them twist that." Jessica nodded, but there was a flicker of concern in her eyes. "You need to be careful. Hargrave's not just after your reputation. He's going for everything, your legacy, your future, the very core of who you are." Elon paused, considering her words. The weight of it all threatened to crush him, but he had come too far to back down. He wasn't just fighting for his reputation anymore. He was fighting for the vision he had spent his life creating. "I've been through a lot worse," he said, his voice low but firm. "This is just another challenge, and I don't lose." Jessica smiled slightly, a rare moment of warmth breaking through her professional demeanor. "Just remember, Elon, you don't have to do this alone. We're all in this together." As the jury filed back into the courtroom, Elon straightened up, the fire inside him reigniting. He couldn't let Hargrave win. Not now. Not when everything he had worked for was on the line. The defense team was ready for the next phase, the next witness, the final blow. But deep down, Elon knew one thing for certain. This was no longer about the trial. It was about the truth. And the truth would come out, no matter what it took. The judge's gavel came down, signaling the start of the next chapter in the courtroom. Battle. Elon Musk was ready. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. It felt as if time had slowed, each second stretching out longer than the last, as Elon took his seat, preparing for what was to come. The defense had made their case, and the prosecution had retaliated with everything they had. But now the air had shifted once again. The next phase of this trial was about to begin, and Elon could sense that something big was coming, something he hadn't expected. As the jury settled in, the judge called the court to order. He looked stern, as if aware of the gravity of what was happening. Elon's mind raced. Could today be the day that everything would change? Jessica stood, her expression calm, but there was a fire in her eyes that Elon had come to respect. She had been his anchor throughout this storm, always thinking 2 steps ahead. Today, however, something was different. There was an almost imperceptible shift in her demeanor, a quiet anticipation. "Your Honor," Jessica began, addressing the judge with a controlled yet commanding tone. "The defense calls its next witness to the stand. This witness has vital information that we believe will help clarify the facts at hand." The courtroom fell silent as the door to the witness room opened. Elon turned toward it, his heart skipping a beat. The footsteps that followed seemed too loud in the stillness. The witness entering the room was not who he had expected, not even close. In walked Jennifer Holt. Elon's pulse quickened. Jennifer. The name echoed in his mind as he watched her walk toward the stand. She was a former senior executive at Tesla, someone Musk had worked with closely during the company's most formative years. But their relationship had been complicated, to say the least. Jennifer had left Tesla years ago under contentious circumstances that had involved a public falling out between them. Elon had assumed she had gone on to a different life, one far removed from the chaos of his companies. But here, she was standing in front of the jury, the weight of her presence undeniable. Jennifer was tall, composed with dark hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. Her eyes scanned the courtroom as she approached the stand, meeting Elon's gaze for a split second. There was no emotion there, nothing that gave away what she might say. Her expression was unreadable, and that made Elon feel even more uneasy. "Ms. Holt," Jessica said, her voice steady, "please tell the court about your role at Tesla and your relationship with Mr. Musk during your time there." Jennifer nodded, taking her seat on the witness stand. "I joined Tesla in its early days, when the company was still struggling to find its footing," she began, her voice measured and calm. "I was responsible for overseeing operations and working directly with Mr. Musk to ensure the company's growth." Elon's thoughts flashed back to those early days at Tesla, the long hours, the impossible goals, the constant pressure. Jennifer had been integral to some of the most pivotal decisions, but there had always been a sense of tension between them, an unspoken difference in how they viewed the company's direction. "We built something incredible," Jennifer continued, her gaze now fixed on Elon. "But as the company grew, so did the challenges. Elon and I had very different views on how Tesla should be run. Our disagreements became more frequent, more personal, and ultimately, we parted ways." Elon tensed at her words. "So, this is how it's going to be," he thought. Jennifer had been a valuable ally in the past, but hearing her speak about their differences in such a detached manner stirred something in him. He couldn't help but wonder what she was about to say next, but then came the bombshell. Jennifer paused for a moment, her fingers tapping lightly on the wooden surface of the witness stand. But there's something important that people don't know, something that's been kept quiet until now. During the time I was with Tesla, I saw things. I saw the lengths Mr. Musk went to, not just to build the company, but to keep it afloat. He faced impossible odds, and sometimes he bent the truth to make things happen. He didn't do it for greed, he did it because he believed in Tesla's future, in what it could be. The words hit Elon like a punch to the gut. He had never expected Jennifer to speak so frankly about him, let alone admit that she knew about his struggles. The truth was, there had been moments, many of them, when he had made difficult decisions that could have been perceived as manipulative, as bending the rules. But they were decisions made with one goal in mind: to keep Tesla alive, to push the boundaries of what was possible. "I'm not here to defend him," Jennifer said, her voice gaining strength. "But I am here to tell you the truth. I've watched him struggle, and I've seen the toll it took on him. The world has no idea what it's like to be in his shoes, to try to save a company that everyone said was doomed. He did what he had to do." Elon's heart pounded in his chest. This was not how he expected things to go. Jennifer wasn't here to tear him down. In fact, she was doing the opposite. She was speaking to the truth of what he had gone through. It wasn't just about numbers and stock prices. It was about the human cost of building something that changed the world. "But here's the real issue," Jennifer continued, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of her words. "The prosecution wants to paint Elon as a man who will do anything to protect his empire no matter the cost. But the reality is, Tesla would not exist without him. The sacrifices he made were never about his own gain. They were about creating something that would change the world, and if that meant making hard choices, so be it." The courtroom was silent. The jury seemed to be absorbing every word. Elon couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Jennifer had just confirmed everything he had fought for, but the price of that confirmation was high. She was exposing the vulnerabilities that had shaped him, vulnerabilities he had tried so hard to keep hidden. As the judge called for a short recess, Elon leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. He wasn't sure if this revelation would help or hurt his case, but one thing was clear. The public image of Elon Musk, the persona everyone thought they knew, was slowly being dismantled. And in its place, the truth was emerging. The recess was brief, but for Elon it felt like an eternity. He sat in his chair, staring at the empty witness stand where Jennifer had just been, her words still echoing in his mind. He wasn't sure if he felt relief or dread. Jennifer's testimony had been unexpected, but it had also been a glimpse into the truth of what he had done. It wasn't a perfect picture, but it was real, and that, Elon knew, was something the world rarely cared for. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. Jessica sat down next to him, her eyes narrowed with concern. "Jennifer wasn't supposed to do that," she said quietly, as if reading his mind. "She gave a lot of context, but it doesn't necessarily put us in the clear." Elon rubbed his temples. "I didn't expect her to come out with the truth like that. She didn't sugarcoat anything." "She didn't have to," Jessica replied, her voice steady but with a hint of worry. "But what she said wasn't enough. It doesn't make your actions excusable, just more understandable. And Hargrave will use that to attack your character. He'll twist it." Elon nodded. "I know, I've been trying to fight my entire life for the future, but I'm not just fighting for the future of Tesla or SpaceX. I'm fighting for what I believe in. Sometimes that means making tough choices." Jessica leaned in closer. "That's exactly what Hargrave will latch onto. He'll argue that your choices were calculated, that you're someone willing to cross any line for success. We can't let him paint you as a reckless businessman who doesn't care about the consequences." Elon glanced up, his eyes filled with a sense of resolve. "I don't care how they paint me anymore. What matters is the vision I've always had, the one I'm fighting for." Jessica paused, her gaze softening for a moment. "And that's what we need to make clear, not just to the jury, but to the world." The gavel sounded, signaling the return of the court to session. Elon stood up, trying to gather his thoughts and focus. His mind was still processing Jennifer's words. The world would never understand what it took to build something from nothing. But in this courtroom, the truth was coming out piece by piece. As the prosecutor stood, Hargrave's eyes narrowed, and Elon felt the weight of the coming storm. He could tell that the prosecution was ready to strike back, to twist Jennifer's testimony into a weapon. This trial was far from over. Hargrave began, his tone as slick and calculated as ever. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've just heard from Ms. Holt, someone who worked closely with Mr. Musk during the early years of Tesla. She admits that Mr. Musk made difficult decisions, but what she fails to acknowledge is the cost of those decisions. The risk he took wasn't just to his own empire, it was to the lives of countless investors who trusted him." Elon clenched his fists under the table, his body tensing. He had heard this before, the accusation that he was a risk-taker, that his actions had consequences that went beyond the boardroom. Hargrave was painting him as a reckless genius, someone who had no regard for the fallout of his decisions. "Ms. Holt may want to paint a picture of a man who sacrificed for his company," Hargrave continued, "but let's be clear about one thing. The cost of those sacrifices was not just a few sleepless nights or long hours. The cost was the trust of the very people who believed in Mr. Musk. The cost was millions of dollars in lost investments." Elon felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. Hargrave wasn't just attacking his business decisions, he was attacking his very character. This wasn't just about the numbers, it was about the essence of who Elon Musk was. And if the jury bought into it, it could all come crashing down. The prosecutor's words dripped with venom. "Mr. Musk wants you to believe that he's some kind of visionary, someone who is above the rules, but the reality is he's a man who will stop at nothing to protect his own interests, even if it means lying to investors, misleading the public, and playing fast and loose with the truth." Elon's mind raced. How do I fight back against that? How could he prove that his vision was worth fighting for, that his actions, though controversial, were motivated by something greater than personal gain? The answer came to him suddenly. It wasn't just about defending the choices he had made. It was about showing the world why he had made them in the first place. He couldn't just sit there and let Hargrave dictate the narrative. He had to take control of the story. It was time to show the jury who he truly was. When it was his turn to speak, Elon stood, his legs feeling like lead beneath him. He could feel the eyes of the entire courtroom on him, every inch of him under scrutiny. But this was the moment he had been waiting for. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice steady but filled with an unshakable conviction. "I won't stand here and pretend that my decisions were always easy or without consequence. I've made mistakes, but every single decision I made with one goal in mind: to push humanity forward." He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle in. "When I founded Tesla, people laughed at me. They said electric cars would never work, that the company would never survive. But I believed in something bigger than that. I believed in a world where we could build a sustainable future for our children. And I still believe that today. I didn't sacrifice everything for money. I sacrificed for the future, and if I made mistakes along the way, I'm willing to own up to them. But I will never apologize for trying to change the world." The room was silent. For a brief moment, Elon could feel the eyes of the jury soften. He wasn't just defending his actions, he was giving them a glimpse into the truth of his heart. And in that moment, he knew that he had to keep fighting for what was right, for what he believed in, no matter what the consequences. Jessica smiled at him, a quiet nod of approval. She had always known this was the moment Elon needed to seize. It was no longer just about winning the trial. It was about showing the world who he truly was. "Thank you, Mr. Musk," the judge said, breaking the silence. "For you may be seated." As Elon sat down, his heart was pounding in his chest. This was far from over, but for the first time in days, he felt a sense of hope. The truth was out there, and now it was up to the jury to decide what they would believe. The courtroom felt charged with anticipation, as though every person present was holding their breath, waiting for the verdict to be decided not just by the jury, but by the very heart of the story itself. Elon sat at the defense table, eyes forward though his mind was racing. He had said what he needed to say. He had shared the truth, the vision that had kept him going, no matter how misunderstood he might have been. But now, it was up to the jury to decide whether his words would land with the weight he intended, or whether the shadow of doubt would overshadow his ambition. Jessica leaned toward him, her voice a whisper, only for him to hear. "It's time. This is the moment we've been working toward." Elon nodded, his hands folded on the table, fingers tapping gently, rhythmically. He had done his part. Now all that remained was for his legal team to put everything together in a final, powerful statement. The judge stood and looked across the courtroom, signaling the end of the defense's presentation. "Prosecution, your closing argument." Hargrave, the prosecutor, rose slowly, taking a moment to let the room settle into the silence before him. He had the air of a man who knew how to play to an audience. His face, though neutral, betrayed just a touch of satisfaction. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Hargrave began, his voice low and commanding, "we've heard from Mr. Musk, who stands before you today as a man who claims to have been simply trying to change the world. But let us not forget what we've witnessed over the course of this trial: the countless lies, the manipulation of the stock market, the misleading statements that were intended to deceive not just investors, but the entire public." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Elon's jaw tightened, but he stayed still, not allowing the anger to show. Hargrave's strategy was clear. He wanted to turn the public perception against Elon, to frame him as someone who used his charisma and influence to control the narrative, to put himself above the law. Mr. Musk's decisions, as he admitted to you himself, were calculated. They were not simply the misguided choices of a visionary. They were the decisions of a man willing to do anything, lie, cheat, and manipulate, to maintain control of his empire, Hargrave continued, his voice rising now with passion. And all the while, people like you, the investors, the people who trusted him, were left in the wake of his recklessness. Hargrave paused again, letting the sting of his words land. Then he delivered his final blow. He may be a man who can look you in the eye and tell you he's doing what's best for the world, but in reality, he was doing what was best for him. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why he must be held accountable. Because if a man like Elon Musk is allowed to escape justice for his actions, what does that say about the rest of us? That the rules don't apply to those with enough power, enough influence? He turned to the jury, his eyes locking with each of their faces one by one. "And we cannot allow that to happen. The evidence is clear, the deception is undeniable. I ask you to find the defendant guilty." The room seemed to hold its breath. The defense team exchanged looks. Elon's heart pounded as Hargrave returned to his seat with a final, satisfied glance toward him. There was a quiet tension in the air, a sense that this was the moment that would tip the scales one way or the other. "Ms. Johnson," the judge said, turning to Jessica. Jessica rose from her seat, taking a breath, her eyes focused and calm. She was the last line of defense, the one who would have to turn the tide in Elon's favor, or else risk everything they had worked for, unraveling. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice unwavering, "you've heard it. All today. The accusations, the claims, the back and forth. But I want to bring you back to the beginning of this case. What is this really about? Is this about the numbers on a screen, the profit margins, the stock price?" She paused, giving the jury a moment to reflect as if she were speaking directly to them. "No, this trial is about something far more important. It's about the very nature of innovation. It's about the sacrifices we make for progress. And it's about whether we as a society should punish those who risk everything to make the impossible a reality." Jessica turned slightly, facing Elon with a look of quiet confidence. "Elon Musk has never pretended to be perfect. In fact, he's told you himself that he's made mistakes. But what you must understand is that those mistakes came with an unwavering commitment to change the world, to make it a better place. And yes, sometimes that means doing things that others may not agree with. Sometimes it means pushing the limits of what is possible. But it never ever means putting his own interests ahead of those he's trying to serve." She looked back at the jury, her gaze firm and focused. "We live in a world where innovation is often met with resistance, where those who dare to dream big are questioned, scrutinized, and even attacked for trying to create something greater than themselves. Elon Musk took on the greatest challenge of all, to change the way the world works. And yes, he made tough calls along the way, but those decisions were driven by a belief in something bigger than profit, bigger than power. Jessica's voice grew even stronger, her conviction clear. He believed in a sustainable future, a future where technology is used to improve the lives of millions, and he fought for that future every single day. The room was still. Every person in the courtroom was locked onto Jessica, hanging on her every word. Elon Musk has never been about greed or personal gain. He's been about creating something that lasts. And in the end, isn't that what we want? Don't we want the people who are shaping our future to be driven by something more than just numbers? Don't we want them to care about the legacy they leave behind, the impact they make? Jessica took a deep breath and looked at the jury, her expression softening ever so slightly. We're asking you not just to see a businessman in front of you today, but to see a man who has given everything for a cause he believes in, a man who took risks because he believed those risks would ultimately benefit all of us. She paused, giving them one last moment to absorb everything she had said. The question you must ask yourselves isn't whether Elon Musk has made mistakes. It's whether his vision for the future, his commitment to a better world is worth the risk, and whether in the end we should punish someone for daring to push the boundaries of what's possible. With that, Jessica returned to her seat, her expression resolute. The jury was silent, the courtroom still. Everyone knew that what would come next would change everything. The judge cleared his throat. The jury will now deliberate. The gavel rang through the air, signaling a brief break before the decision would be made. Elon sat back in his chair, his hands still resting on the table. He couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. He had fought for the truth, and now it was in the hands of those who would decide whether that truth was enough to change the world, or whether the world was too afraid to change with him. The air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation as the judge called the jury back into the room. The weight of the trial had been felt by everyone present, the witnesses, the lawyers, the spectators, and, most of all, Elon Musk. After days of testimony, arguments, and tense moments, the time had finally come. The moment that would decide his future. Elon sat at the defense table, his hands folded neatly in front of him, trying to keep his composure. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, thoughts about his children, about Tesla, about SpaceX, about everything he had worked so hard for. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was certain: everything hinged on the decision that was about to be made. Jessica sat beside him, her eyes unwavering, her posture straight. The only sign of her nervousness was the subtle tapping of her fingers against the wooden armrest. She had fought so hard for him, and now, like him, she was waiting for the final judgment. The judge cleared his throat, his gavel tapping once more. The courtroom grew deathly silent. Will the jury foreperson please stand and deliver the verdict? The foreperson rose slowly, a sheet of paper in hand. The entire room leaned forward, waiting for what felt like the longest moment of their lives. The foreperson glanced at the judge, then at the courtroom before speaking. We, the jury, find the defendant, Elon Musk, not guilty of the charges brought against him. A collective gasp rippled through the room. For a moment, Elon couldn't breathe. It was as if the weight of the last few weeks, months, years, had all been released in one final, overwhelming wave. His body relaxed as the adrenaline that had been coursing through his veins for days began to dissipate. Not guilty, the words echoed in his mind. He had won. Not just the trial, but something far more important: the truth, his future, and the chance to keep fighting for the world he wanted to build. The courtroom erupted into a mix of relief, murmurs, and gasps. People were shaking hands. Some were even crying tears of joy, while others seemed stunned by the unexpected outcome. Elon stood slowly, his legs feeling like they were made of lead. He turned to Jessica, and for the first time in what felt like forever, a smile broke across his face. She gave him a quick, almost imperceptible nod. She had believed in him from the very beginning. "I can't believe it," he muttered to her, his voice almost a whisper. "You did it," Jessica replied, her voice calm but filled with pride. "You showed them who you are." The judge raised his hand for silence, and the room gradually quieted down. The court thanks the jury for their service. Mr. Musk, you are free to go. Elon turned to leave, but before he could exit the courtroom, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned around to see Jennifer Holt, who had been a key witness during the trial. Her expression was one of silent support, and though she hadn't said a word, Elon could tell she was relieved. "You did the right thing," she said simply. "It wasn't just about winning the case, it was about standing up for what you believe in." Elon offered a smile of gratitude. "Thanks, Jennifer. Your words made all the difference." As he walked out of the courtroom, the reporters outside rushed toward him with their cameras flashing, eager to get a statement, to hear from the man who had been at the center of the trial that had captivated the world. But Elon wasn't interested in talking to the press just yet. He had a much more important task ahead: the future. In the days that followed the verdict, the world reacted. News outlets covered the trial, discussing the fallout and what the case had meant. Social media was filled with opinions from every angle, but the one thing that stood out was the sense of relief and respect that Elon Musk had garnered from his supporters. The trial had become more than just a legal battle. It had become a statement about vision, about resilience, about what it truly meant to be a disruptor in a world that often resisted change. Elon had faced the fire and come out unscathed. He hadn't just defended his actions, he had defended the very idea of innovation itself. And as he walked into the offices of SpaceX later that week, a renewed sense of purpose filled him. The work was far from done. There were still rockets to launch, cars to manufacture, and a planet to save. But Elon Musk had learned something important during the trial. It wasn't just about the battles you fought in courtrooms or boardrooms. It was about the battles you fought within yourself, the moments of self-doubt, the choices that weighed heavily on your conscience. In the end, the trial had revealed a truth that Elon had always known deep down. You don't change the world by playing it safe. You change it by daring to dream bigger than anyone else, by risking everything for a cause that's greater than yourself. And no matter how many times the world tried to knock him down, Elon Musk would always get back up, because that's what it took to build the future. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?